Family promised me. I used to say, that sentence aged faster than I did. I began packing 3 weeks before the surgery. The suitcase was small, navy blue. It had a soft dent in one corner from a trip I took to Galway in my 50s, when I still believed plane tickets were the cure for most things. I smoothed a folded nightgown into the bottom cream, with little purple violets, and laid my second best robe on top. Not the silk one, the flannel. Hospitals are always too cold. The admission letter was pinned to the fridge door with a ceramic magnet that used to hold up my grandson's spelling tests. Now it only held reminders. Things not to forget in a house growing quieter. I didn't tell anyone I was scared. The doctors had called it routine. They always do, as if the body is a machine and not a map of quiet aches and memories. I didn't want to be dramatic, so I practiced smiling in the mirror. Practiced sounding light when I called my son James to remind him of the date. He said, "Of course, Mom. I blocked off the whole day. Don't even worry about it." His voice was warm, reassuring. I wanted to believe him, so I circled the date in red on the calendar. July 2nd, a Tuesday. I liked the symmetry of it. The year half gone, the hope of being cared for gently tucked into a weekday, that week. I cleaned the guest room in case James wanted to stay over. I put fresh towels out, the ones with the lace trim, and set his favorite mug white with navy dots beside the kettle. I bought decaf in case he came in late, the way he used to when he visited from college. Letting his keys jangle softly so he wouldn't wake me. I don't know why I did all that. He wasn't staying. Still, I placed a box of cereal he liked at the front of the pantry, folded the corner of the tissue box so it looked new. It's these small offerings done without being asked. Mothers do that. We build altars out of towels and toast, out of quiet readiness a week before the surgery. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the phone. James hadn't called in a few days. I told myself it was work. It's always work. He manages accounts now, or maybe it's people. I've stopped asking. The details change, but the tone doesn't. I pressed his name and listened to the line ring twice before he picked up. There was noise behind him, traffic, laughter, voices that weren't mine. He said, "Sorry, Mom, can I call you back? Or just getting the check?" I imagined a table, a group of people clinking glasses. Maybe his wife Laura was there. She never liked when I called during dinner. Once she told me kindly but firmly, "Evenings are our time now." I understood. I always understand. I said, "Don't worry. Just wanted to check you had the hospital address." He laughed gently. "Yes, Mom. I have it in my calendar. I'll be there. To take you in and pick you up like I promised." That word "promised" wrapped itself around my ribs like warmth. I held on to it like a shawl dot. After we hung up, I made a list: ID, insurance card, slippers, lip balm, book I probably won't read. Something to hold on to when the anesthesia wears. Offie didn't write that last one down, but I packed it anyway. The night before, I cooked too much dinner. Chicken pot pie, crust golden, vegetables soft. I set 2 places at the table out of habit, then took one away. I ate slowly, looking out at the hydrangeas in the garden. They'd bloomed a month early this year. My late husband used to say they always knew something before we did. After dinner, I lit a candle by the kitchen sink. Not for prayer exactly, just a ritual, something to mark the moment. Something to say, "I am still here." I opened the suitcase one last time and tucked in a small photo. James at age 5, covered in frosting, grinning at a cake I made with strawberries arranged like a heart. His hair stuck up on one side. It was always too busy running to notice his own reflection. I closed the suitcase and placed it by the front door. Then I waited. The morning came, soft and gray. I wore a scarf with embroidered edge. It's something pretty, but not too bright. I checked my phone. No messages. But I told myself maybe he was already on his way. I sat in the armchair, the one with worn arms and a soft indent that fits my body like a glove, and watched the driveway. 7-15, 7:30, 7-40-5. At 8:02 I texted, "Just checking in, still good for 8:30. No reply. I waited 5 more minutes. Then 10. My hands were shaken, not from panic, just that quiet kind of tremble that comes when your body knows something before your heart does. At 8:21, I called a cab. The driver's name was Hassan. He was kind, helped me with my suitcase, asked if I needed to stop for anything. I said no and folded my hands in my lap. The hospital lobby smelled like lemon disinfectant and coffee in cardboard cups. They gave me a wristband, asked if I had someone with me. I said yes. I think I said yes. They asked if I wanted them to call anyone. Told them no. He was just running late. He'd be here. I sat in the waiting area with my suitcase beside me and the photo in my palm. Like a relic. A nurse came at 9:10. He still hadn't called. I told her I'd be okay. I told myself that too. As she wheeled me back, I turned my head and watched the glass doors, hoping to see him walk through. Hoping he'd be rushing, apologetic, still wearing the shirt I gave him last Christmas. It's the blue one. The one with the crisp collar, but no one came. The doors stayed shut, the room was cold. I made a joke about the gown, and the nurse laughed politely. I appreciated that. She tucked a warm blanket around me and asked if I had any family waiting. I told her not today. She touched my hand, and that's when I felt it. Not anger, not fear. Something gentler. A slow erasing like chalk in the rain. It wasn't just the missed ride. It was the missing effort. The silence that came after a promise. It's the way people fade, not all at once, but moment by moment, like sugar dissolving in tea. I closed my eyes as they prepped the 4. I didn't dream. Not during the surgery, but I remember waking up alone. Not lonely. Alone. And I knew something had changed. It hadn't broken yet, but something in me had bent. A soft pause. A click of awareness. They say healing begins with hope. But sometimes it begins with a quiet unraveling of it. And I was starting to feel the thread in my hand. The recovery was slower than I expected. The doctor said everything went well. No complications. I was cleared to go home after 2 nights. They asked if someone was coming to pick me up. I hesitated just for a second. Then gave them James's name and number. They called him twice. On the 3rd try, someone finally picked up a clipped voice, his wife's. She said he was busy at the office, but they'd send someone. They sent a car service. Black sedan. The driver had sunglasses on and didn't offer to help with my bag. I sat in the back and watched the city slide by through the window, trying not to cry over something as small and ordinary as a mist hand. When I got home, the house felt bigger. That's the thing no one tells you about aging. It's not the wrinkles or the joints. It's the way a room grows around you when no one else walks into it. I texted James later that night. It's just a simple thank you. He replied the next morning. Glad you're okay? Been slammed at work. We'll call soon. I stared at the screen for a long time. Soon is one of those words that ages fast too. It starts soft, then stiffens with silence. I told myself it was fine. He's busy. He has a family. I've always been independent. I've boiled water and made tea the way I used to. Black with 1 sugar, but it tasted flat. As if something had gone stale, that wasn't the leaves. Weeks passed, there was no follow-up call. No visit. No knock at the door with a plastic bag of groceries or a card scribbled in his old handwriting. I tried to justify it. Maybe Laura didn't want the boys exposed to hospital germs. Maybe he didn't want to hover. Maybe they thought I needed rest and space. There's always a reason, isn't there? Distance always comes wearing explanations. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, 1 drawer at a time. Lined the cutlery tray with new paper. Wiped down the spice jars. Threw out a tin of thyme that had expired in 2014. The quiet was thick, but I filled it with movement. When you're alone long enough, you start narrating your day in your head. I'd catch myself thinking, James would laugh at that, or the boys would love this cake. And then I'd realize I hadn't spoken those names aloud in days. I used to be the kind of mother who remembered everything: birthdays, allergies, the name of that one friend he had in second grade who wore cowboy boots to school. Now, I was lucky if I got a Happy Mother's Day text before noon. That year, it came at 3:47 p.m. No call. Just a message: "Hope you're having a lovely day. Boys made cards. We'll send pictures later." They never came. I looked through an old box that night, found a photo of James at age 10, curled up in a blanket fort we made out of chairs and sheets. He had a flashlight and a stack of Goosebumps books beside him. He used to tell me, "You're the best mom." No hesitation, no pause, just truth the way only children can say it. Where had that boy gone? Where had I gone? I tried calling a week after Mother's Day just to say hello. Laura picked up. Her voice was tight and sweet. It's the kind of tone you use when you're already annoyed before the call even begins. She said James was swamped. End of quarter madness. The boys were at soccer. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes, just calling to chat. There was a pause on her end. Then she said, "I'll tell him you rang. That's all." That was the entire conversation. No "how are you?" No "come by." Not even a "take care." I stood in the living room for a long time afterward, phone still in hand, as if the weight of it could summon something warmer outside. The hydrangeas were beginning to wilt. Once, I saw a missed call from James. My heart leaped. I called back within 2 minutes, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message. "Hi, sweetheart. Just saw I missed you. Call me when you can. No rush. Just wanted to hear your voice." He never called back. I started walking in the mornings. There's a park a few blocks away with a little pond where ducks gather. I'd sit on a bench with a thermos of tea and watch the water ripple. Sometimes I brought breadcrumbs. Sometimes I just watched. There were other women there, some in pairs, some with strollers, some with books. One woman, Florence, always wore a bright pink scarf and had a laugh that made you want to sit closer. We talked about the weather, birds, scones, never our children. That's the thing about women like us. We learn how to float in conversation. We learn not to ask the questions we're afraid to answer ourselves. The church held a summer fair. I volunteered at the tea stall, folding napkins and pouring lemonade. I made ginger biscuits the way James used to like, soft in the middle, with just a pinch of salt. They were all eaten by strangers. I watched a mother chase her toddler across the grass and felt something twist in my chest. Not jealousy, not grief, just a soft ache, like pressing on a bruise that hasn't healed yet. I saw someone take a photo with their phone and almost asked them to send it to me, forgetting I wasn't part of anyone's gallery anymore. Eventually, I stopped, calling not out of spite, just out of quiet, out of surrender. I still remembered his birthday. I still sent cards to the boys' comic book ones or ones with animals in party hats. But I stopped expecting replies. I let the silence speak first. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and check my phone, as if he might have remembered something in his sleep. But the screen always glowed empty. Once I asked myself, what did I do wrong? That's the question mothers whisper to the mirror when no one's listening. Was I too soft? Too giving? Did I make it too easy to be forgotten? I think the truth is simpler and harder. I stopped being useful. I stopped being needed. And when a woman is no longer needed, the world finds ways to make her invisible. A neighbor's son came by to mow my lawn one weekend. His name was Adam, 17, polite, still learning how to fill his shoes. I paid him in cash and a glass of lemonade. He asked about the hydrangeas and said his grandmother used to love them. I smiled. He said she passed 2 years ago and that he still talks to her sometimes. I told him that was good. Grandmothers hear you better when they're quiet. When he left, I stood by the window and watched him disappear down the street. Then I whispered aloud, "To no one, I think I'm disappearing too." That summer, I stopped setting an extra cup on the table. I stopped making extra servings just in case. I turned off the porch light earlier. I folded towels without thinking someone might come by, and still I told myself, maybe next week. Hope is a quiet, stubborn thing. Even when you bury it finds a way to bloom beneath your ribs. But that year it was blooming slower and colder, and part of me was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I had already been left behind. It began with a plastic bag of receipts. Not dramatic, not meant to be found. It's just the quiet clutter of a life lived too close to the edge of other people's plans. I was cleaning out the second drawer in the sideboard, the one I always meant to organize. Side were old birthday cards, expired coupons, a set of spare keys I no longer recognized, and a pale blue pharmacy bag containing a curled stack of receipts. At first, I didn't look closely, but one of the slips had a recent date, 2 weeks ago, a department store I hadn't visited in years. I unfolded it. Children's clothing, a full set. Sizes far too small for my body or my needs. I blinked, then found another electronics. This time a smartwatch. The kind James once said he couldn't afford. Another from a fancy home decor place in the mall. Monogrammed table linens, the kind Laura liked, the card number printed at the bottom. It looked familiar. I pulled out my wallet and compared it to my backup credit card, the one I kept for emergencies and hadn't used since before the surgery. The numbers matched. That's when my hands began to shake. I didn't call right. Away. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the receipts spread before me like puzzle pieces. Dates, times, stores I never entered. Items I never touched. The total was almost $1,000. I whispered the number out loud. Once, then again, softer, as if saying it quietly would make it less real. At first I told myself there had to be a mistake, a mix-up, shared accounts still linked somehow. Maybe James had meant to ask. Maybe he had asked and I'd forgotten, but no, would have remembered. I remembered everything. That was part of the problem. Later that evening, I logged into my account. It took me 3 tries to remember the password. My hands were clammy. My breath caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. There it was. A long line of charges. Small at first $9.99, $14.76. A streaming service I didn't subscribe to. Then larger $312, $147, $289, all clustered in the weeks after my surgery. While I was recovering, while I was waiting for a call that never came. They hadn't stopped calling because they were busy. They'd stopped calling because they were using me without having to face me. I sat back in the chair. Everything around me suddenly looked unfamiliar, as if the whole house had shifted 2 inches to the left. I closed the laptop gently, like it might break from the weight of what it had shown me. Then I made tea. Because that's what women like me do. When the ground cracks, we fill the kettle. We keep our hands moving, we survive. The next day, I walked to the bank. I wore my tan coat with the floral lining, the one I always said was too nice for errands. I felt like I needed armor. The woman at the desk was kind. She looked about 30 with glossy hair and sharp nails. She smiled and asked how she could help. I explained softly that I needed to check some card activity. She pulled up the account and clicked through the screen, her smile fading slightly. She asked if I recognized the addresses on the shipping receipts. I didn't, but I knew the neighborhood. James and Laura's new subdivision, a place I had never been invited to, though I had seen pictures on social media. White fences, garden flags. She asked if I wanted to dispute the charges. I didn't answer right away. I just asked for printed copies. I needed to see it. I needed the paper in my hand to weigh the truth myself. As I walked out, the wind picked up. Leaves swirled around my ankles. I felt like I was watching myself from far away. An older woman with a stack of papers clutched to her chest, walking back into a home that no longer felt like safety. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling fan. Watching the shadows it cast flicker and shift like memories I no longer trusted. I thought about the time James broke his wrist in middle school. How I'd rushed from work, barefoot in the hospital parking lot because I'd changed out of heels and left my flats behind in the rush. I remembered how he looked at me then, like I was the only person who could fix the pain. And now I was a card number, a silent account, a name on a billing address. The real unraveling came 2 days later. It was late afternoon. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon-eyed baked muffins for the church ladies, more out of habit than hope. I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed. It was Florence from the park. She said, "Did you see the pictures?" I didn't know what she meant. She said they'd been tagged in a mutual friend's post. A birthday party. James and Laura's youngest. Big backyard bash with balloons and streamers and a magician in a red velvet coat. I hadn't been invited. That wasn't new. But what she said next caught in my ribs. "Looks like you helped pay for the bounce house." I laughed, not out of humor, out of something tighter. The kind of laugh that doesn't make it to your eyes. I opened the post after we hung up, and there it was. A bright blue castle with yellow turrets. Inflated and swaying, full of squealing children. One comment read, "Such a generous gift from Nana. Thank you for the party magic." But I hadn't given anything. I hadn't even known it was happening. I stared at the photo. James, standing off to the side with a drink in hand, wearing the watch from the receipt. Laura holding a balloon string in one hand and her phone in the other. No one looked for me in the frame, because no one expected me to be in it. They used my money, then erased my presence. A benefactor with no voice. A donor with no invitation. Mother with no name. I sat on the porch for a long time that night, the printed receipts in one hand and the photo, still glowing on my phone. The hydrangeas had gone brown at the edges. Didn't bother trimming them. Some things die in their own time. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But there was no room for tears, only a silence that stretched across the porch like a shadow. I thought about calling, about asking, about confronting. But something in me said, wait, because this wasn't just about a card or a party. It was about being written out even as I was used up. It was about how some betrayals come not with knives, but with quiet smiles and automatic payments. The next morning, I made a new list. Call the lawyer, change the account passwords, go to the attic and find the papers, breathe. I added that last one because I had forgotten to do it for too long. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I was old enough to ignore and kind enough not to question. But they forgot one thing. I had raised them. I knew how they moved. I had taught them how to speak. I knew what silence covered, and I was done mistaking that silence for love. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm in, clutching the receipts or the bank statements or the photo of the inflatable castle they bought with my money. That isn't how women like me fight. We wait. We arrange our thoughts like cutlery in a drawer. Then we arrive, measured, polite, prepared. I called James and asked if we could meet for coffee, somewhere public, neutral, no chance of yelling. No excuses to hang up. He hesitated, then said, "Sure. I have a window Friday afternoon. Can we? Make it quick." I said yes. Even though I knew I wouldn't be rushed, the cafe was one of those sleek places with hanging plants and chalkboard menus. I arrived early, sat near the window with a tea I didn't sip, watched the door. He came in 10 minutes late, scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. When he finally saw me, he smiled like someone greeting an old teacher they didn't expect. "To see again, Mom," he said. "You look good." I smiled politely. "So do you." He ordered a coffee and sat down. His wedding ring glinted. He looked tired, older, but still my son. Still the boy who once held my hand when he couldn't fall asleep after watching something too scary on TV. It's strange how memory can exist right alongside disappointment. I eased into it. I asked how work was. He gave short answers. I asked about the boys. He scrolled to show me a picture of them at a baseball game. I pretended not to notice that I hadn't been invited. Then I folded my hands, took a breath, and said I went through some of my old card statements this week. He didn't react. Just sipped his coffee. I noticed some charges I didn't recognize. Still nothing. No shift in his posture. No flicker of guilt. They were 4 things I'm fairly sure I didn't buy. I said gently. A smartwatch. Some children's clothes. A bounce. House rental. He set down the cup. Mom. I waited. Let the silence do the work. I didn't think it would be a big deal, he said. It was just a few things. We were tight that month. Meant to talk to you about it, but you didn't, I said. And it wasn't just 1 month. He rubbed the back of his neck. Looked out the window. You've always said I could come to you if we needed help? Yes, I said. Come to me, not take from me. His eyes narrowed a little. You're blowing this out of proportion. There it was. That word, proportion. And a moment later, it's the one I had been waiting for. Dramatic. You've always gotten like this, he said. Emotional, taking everything personally. Not like we drained your savings or anything. I looked at him, really looked, and realized he saw me as something finite. A wallet with sentimental value. A resource that didn't require thanks. I asked him quietly, do you know where I was the day you charged $312 at that department store? He frowned, shook his head. I was having stitches removed from my surgery. Alone, he blinked. You should have. Said something, I did. I said, you said you were busy. Then you sent a driver. He leaned back. Laura said it was the best option. The boys had school. I had meetings. We didn't think you'd want a big fuss. I nodded. That phrase, big fuss, is the armor people use when they don't want to see the pain they've caused. They pretend they're respecting your space, when really they're erasing your presence. I reached into my bag and placed the printed receipts on the table. Not all of them. It's just a few. He looked at them, then looked away. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I'm asking for honesty. His jaw tightened. I told you. I meant to talk to you. We just forgot. As if I were an appointment on a calendar, a line in a budget, something that slips between emails and errands. I asked him one last question. Why didn't you invite me to Ethan's birthday? He looked genuinely confused. It wasn't personal, he said. It was just busy. Laura's parents were in town, and the backyard's not that big. And we figured you wouldn't be comfortable around all the noise. I stared at him. So you spent my money on a party I wasn't welcome at. He sighed, like he was tired of explaining. As if my pain was inconvenient, Mom. It's not like that. If you're twisting everything, you're being a burden. I finished for him. He didn't answer. And that silence was everything. When I got home, I didn't cry. I lit a candle by the sink, washed the mug I'd left from breakfast, ran a cloth over the table. My hands moved like clockwork, like habit. And then I walked into the den, opened the file cabinet, K, and took out the envelope labeled estate, K, planning. It was time to rewrite some things, not out of vengeance, out of clarity, I think. In that cafe, I finally saw it. He didn't see me anymore. He saw obligation. Guilt, mild. Inconvenience. He didn't remember the woman who worked double shifts to keep him in school, stayed up past midnight sewing costumes for school plays, who skipped meals so he could have new shoes. To him, I was a box he didn't check, a number on a bank line, a voice. He answered only when it suited him. I told Florence about it the next morning on our bench at the park. She didn't say much, just listened. Passed me half a biscuit from her paper bag. When I finished, she said softly, sometimes they only see the hand, never the woman it's attached to. And that stayed with me because I had spent decades offering my hand with love, with loyalty, with sacrifice. And now I was ready to close it. I walked home through the side streets, past fences that needed repainting and children's chalk drawings that rain hadn't yet erased. The air smelled of summer turning. Sweet, but fading. I opened the door, stepped into my house, stopped my house, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like it truly belonged to me again. I stood in the hallway, sunlight streaming through the curtain, and whispered, not out of anger, but out of peace. I'm not your burden. That evening, I cooked dinner for one. Salmon with lemon, asparagus, and a small glass of wine. I lit the good candle, ate slowly, no distractions. No apologies, and when I folded the napkin at the end, smiled. Because something had shifted and I was done being the easy one. It began. with a list. I wrote it on the back of an old grocery receipt. Not because I didn't have paper, I had a drawer full, but because I didn't want the list to feel official yet. I wanted it to feel like a thought. A possibility, it said. Call. Mr. Sheeran, change passwords, go to storage. Remove James from. I stopped there. My pen hovered. It felt final to write it, but I already knew what the rest of the sentence was. Remove James from the will. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Sheeran in years. He'd done our estate planning back when. My husband was still alive. A quiet, balding man who smelled faintly of tobacco and peppermint. Always gentle with paperwork. Always clear with numbers. He answered on the second ring, Mrs. Talbot. Course I remember you. He didn't ask why. I was calling. Just offered to come by the house. Said we could discuss everything in person. No pressure. I liked that because by then I didn't need pressure. I needed action. When he arrived, I had tea ready, peppermint, just in case. The folder was all ready. On the table, labeled change. We sat at the dining table. He laid out the papers and I began crossing names off quietly. Not out of rage. Out of clarity, James, Laura. Any mention of joint accounts? Any clause marked for the children? Gone. He asked if I wanted to name a new beneficiary. I said, not yet. He nodded, not unkindly. You can always revise it again should things evolve. I smiled, but we both knew this wasn't about evolution. This was about truth. When he left, I stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear. The envelope now sealed and sitting like a heartbeat on my counter, and I felt something new. Not guilt, not grief, not relief. The next day I went to the bank. Changed the passwords. Closed the card James had used without asking. Moved my savings to a private account with no joint access. No linked users, no familial echo. The banker, a young woman with bright eyes and chipped nail polish, asked if I was starting something new. I said yes, myself. She smiled, as if she understood, and I think she did. That weekend, sorted through the attic, not just for paperwork, for pieces of me. I found boxes labeled with James's name, filled with old toys, school awards, few sweaters I'd knitted in my early 40s when I still had the patience for small, even stitches. I sat with them for a while, ran my fingers over the softness, and then I packed them away properly, taped and labeled, not for memory anymore, but for closure. I wasn't erasing. I was redefining. I kept the things that were mine, not the ones that had been used against me. I began saying no. Florence invited me to volunteer at the church bazaar. I said no, not because I didn't want to help, but because I didn't want to. Bake muffins for people who wouldn't ask me how I was doing. I stopped answering calls that came only when someone needed something. I stopped replying to texts that said, "Can you just?" Started watering my garden in the early morning. Just after the sun rose, when the light was gold and soft. I wore the big sun hat I'd always felt silly in. Stopped feeling silly when I realized no one was watching but me. I walked to the bookstore on Main Street, bought 3 hardcovers with no discounts, no guilt. A novel about a woman who moves. To the coast, a memoir by a pianist. A cookbook with pictures of lemon tarts that looked like stained glass. I carried them home like treasures. I made tea. I read for hours. I let myself nap without shame. No errands. No calls. No interruptions. 1. Tuesday morning, I took the bus to the beach. It was cloudy. The kind of gray sky that makes the water look like silver. I walked barefoot on the sand and didn't take a single photo. That's the thing no one tells you sometimes. It's the best parts of your life come after you stop trying to prove you're part of someone else's. I sat on a bench and watched a group of teenagers take selfies near the pier. One of them turned to her friend and said, "Tag me in that," or "It didn't happen." I thought, some of the most important things I've done, no one will ever tag. And that felt right later that week. Florence came by with a peach pie. She said she made too many, but I knew better. We ate on the porch. The wind smelled like rain. We didn't talk about family. Just the color of the sky and the woman down the street who'd started painting her. Mailbox like a barn. Florence asked if I'd considered taking a short trip. I said, maybe. And that maybe felt like a door creaking open. I found a notebook, blank. Pages of blue cloth cover, the kind you hesitate to write in because it's too pretty. But I wrote anyway. Not poems, not plans, just truths. Today, I didn't think about whether James would call. Today, I felt peace when I folded my laundry. Today, I bought strawberries for myself. Small sentences, small steps, but they held weight. One evening, walked into the guest room and stood very still. It still had the towels I'd folded for James when he was supposed to come after my surgery. Still had the mug by the bedside, white with navy dots. I picked it up, washed it, placed it in the cupboard, then I stripped the bed, washed the sheets. Took the lace-trimmed towels and folded them into the linen. Closet, not for guests. For me, that room wasn't waiting anymore. Neither was. I thought there was a knock at the door the next Saturday. A small envelope lay on the mat. No name, just James's. Handwriting. Inside was a folded card. Sorry for the misunderstanding. Hope we can move past this. Love, Jay. No mention of the money. No mention of the hospital. No mention of me. I placed it in the drawer with the expired coupe funks. Some things you don't throw away. You just stop reaching for them. The next time Florence asked me to travel a short bus ride, a lakefront cottage, I said yes. I packed light, just enough, a scarf for evenings. A book for afternoons, and the new will in a small envelope with my lawyer's seal. Not because I expected anything to happen, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Not my belongings. Not my name. Not my power. I didn't tell James I'd changed the paperwork. I didn't need to. Silence can speak for itself. It had spoken for him. Now it spoke for me. And the woman who once waited by the phone, who once checked her messages like prayers. She was folding herself into a new kind of freedom. Quiet, legal, complete. I wasn't angry. I was done. It started quietly. No final speech. No slammed door, no dramatic packing of boxes. Just a withdrawal. Gentle like tidewater slipping back from the shore. First, I stopped replying right away. When James sent his usual text, "Hope you're well. Mom, I waited 2 days before." Answering, I didn't explain. I didn't apologize then. I stopped answering at all, not out of bitterness, but because answering had become performance. A ritual of pretending we were fine. Of responding like a mother who hadn't seen her son spend her money and forget her birthday and leave her in a hospital bed alone. I let the silence grow, and in it, found air. I took a small trip, just 2 nights. A little inn near the lake, with a balcony that faced the trees. The woman who ran it wore cardigans with mismatched buttons and served tea in chipped porcelain. She had a dog named Rupert who followed guests like a shadow. I left no itinerary, told no one I was going, and for the first time in years, I slept through the night. No buzz of a phone, no ache of hoping someone would remember I existed. Just birds, wind, the scent of pine. Back home, I began simplifying, cleared out the pantry, donated the second set of plates, shredded old utility bills, took every framed photo of James and the boys and placed them in a box. Not out of anger, but because the woman smiling in those photos no longer lived here. I didn't throw them away. I just no longer needed to look at a past that refused to grow with me. I replaced one frame with a photo from the lake. A silhouette of myself taken by Florence standing near the dock, looking out at dusk. It was the first photo of me in years where it didn't feel erased. I blocked James's number one morning after folding towels. I didn't do it impulsively. I stared at the screen for a long while, its name glowing like a question. Then I clicked block caller. The phone went silent and the silence felt right, not vengeful, just final. They noticed, eventually. James left a voicemail on the landline. His voice was strained, awkward. "Hey, Mom. Not sure if your phone's acting up or what. It's checking in. Call me back." It's called again the next day. "Did I do something?" Laura said. "Maybe you're upset, but, I thought we talked. I thought we were okay. That was the moment I realized how little he had heard me. We weren't okay. We had never really talked. I had spoken. He had skimmed now. He was skimming absence and finding nothing to grasp. Laura emailed, a short, chilly note. We've tried reaching you. James is hurt. The boys asked about you. Are you ignoring us? I read it twice, then marked it unread, then deleted it. The church ladies asked why I hadn't brought muffins to the last event. I told them I'd been traveling. They didn't ask more. I think some of them recognized the expression in my eyes, the one that comes after you finally stop stretching yourself into rooms where you're only needed. Never Seen. Florence came over one Tuesday with tea cakes and a stack of crossword puzzles. She looked around and smiled. Feels quieter in here, she said. I nodded. I took some things out. Sometimes that's all it takes, she said. Removing what no longer honors you. We ate in silence. The kind that comforts, not avoids. I changed. My emergency contact with my doctor's office to Florence. The receptionist looked up and said, "Not your son anymore." I smiled. "No, just someone who shows up." She nodded, like she understood something without needing the story. One evening, I took the final step. I called the retirement complex on the edge of town, the one with the garden plots and the wide porches. I'd visited it once with a friend who passed last year. Back then, I wasn't ready. Now I was. The woman on the phone was kind. "Yes, we have a few open units. Studio and one bedroom. Full kitchens. You can bring your own furniture. Cats are welcome." I asked if she could send a brochure. Then I surprised myself. No, actually. I'll come see it tomorrow. I visited on a cloudy Wednesday. The air smelled like rosemary and new paint. A man was trimming hedges out front. Inside, someone was playing piano. Not well, but with joy. The apartment was simple. Clean, a small balcony that overlooked the garden. I ran my fingers over the kitchen counter and imagined making tea there. Just one mug. My own. No one would take the last cookie without asking. No one would use my card while I slept. No one would call me a burden in a tone that wore politeness like perfume. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. I moved 2 weeks later. Took only what mattered. The scarf from Florence. The blue journal with my short sentences of truth. My favorite. MUG. The photo from the lake. The envelope with the will. The rest I left behind or donated. I didn't tell James I was moving. I didn't leave an address. I didn't forward the mail. If he really wanted to find me, he'd have to start with something more than a text. On my first night in the new place, I stood barefoot on the balcony. The stars were sharp. The silence tasted different, not hollow, but whole. I slept with the window open, no phone on the nightstand, no name glowing in the dark. A week later, Florence visited. We planted basil and thyme in the little pots by my door. She brought 2 lemon muffins and said, "You look taller." "I feel smaller," I said, "but stronger." We laughed, and that laughter felt real, not performative, not strained. It's just 2 women who had learned to stop asking the world to validate their worth. James must have noticed by now the blocked number, the unanswered emails, the echo of his own silence finally returning to him. But I was no longer reachable in the way he wanted. He could miss me. He could regret me. But he could not access me. That was the boundary. That was the revenge. And it came not with fury, but with vanishing, sometimes. I walked to the edge of the garden in the evening and watched the sun go down behind the cypress. Trees. There is no one to call, no one to remind. No one to forget me. Because I remember myself. I am not a ghost. I am the absence that shaped their reckoning. And now, at last, I am free. A year passed. Seasons turned like quiet pages. The garden. Outside my window bloomed and withered, bloomed again. I learned the names of the birds who visited the sill robins, a wren. One defiant crow with a scar on its wing who came every morning to eat the crumbs I left on the railing. Life didn't explode. It softened. That was the surprise. That reinvention didn't come with fanfare or transformation montages. It came with folded laundry, with muffins baked in silence, with mornings where I didn't check the phone because I no longer needed proof of my own existence. I had erased the noise. And in its place, I found music. I kept my routines. But now they belong to me: early tea on the porch with no interruptions, walks to the small library near the park, letters, real ones exchanged with a pen, friend in Wales I met through a book club online, occasional visits from Florence, who now brought her little niece, Iris, along. Iris liked to draw pictures of Miss M, which she insisted was me, usually holding a watering can and a big flower. I kept one of them on the fridge. It was the only thing I ever let be held up by a magnet anymore. James didn't call. Not for a long time. I suppose at first he thought I was being dramatic again, teaching a lesson, that I'd reappear like I always did with soft words and softer forgiveness. But this time, I didn't. I had no lesson to give, only a life to live, and I was finally living it unobserved, ungraded, unneeded. On the 1-year mark, that very morning I had been discharged from the hospital the year before. The day I waited in the lobby alone, I made a small meal, just for me. Scrambled eggs with parsley, toast with marmalade, a clementine peeled and placed neatly on the plate. I used the good china. Lit the candle on the table, the one I'd once saved for company. I ate slowly. Then I took a walk to the lake. I didn't speak to anyone on the way. I just walked, my shoes steady on the path, my spine straight, my breath calm. I sat on the same bench from before, the one Florence and I had shared when the air smelled like late summer. This time I sat alone, but I didn't feel alone. Not the kind of alone that aches, the kind that lets you stretch, that lets you breathe midday. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then checked the voicemail later. A shaky male voice. Mom, I don't know if this is still your number. I've tried your old one. The house was sold and no one answered the door. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. The boys miss you. I miss you. I didn't realize how far things had gone. Please call me back or just let me know you're okay. He hung up there. No mention of the surgery. No mention of the bounce house. No mention of the card. Just a ripple of guilt and a message left too late. I saved it, not because I wanted to hear it again, but because part of me needed to see how far I had come from the woman who would have clung to those words like breath, to the woman who could hold them in her palm and decide gently to let them go. A few weeks later, I got a letter, thick envelope. No return address. Inside was a note written in Laura's handwriting, stiff, apologetic. A list of updates about the boys. A photo, all 4 of them in matching sweaters in front of a tree. No mention of the past, just a postcard version of their fard. Just a postcard version of their present. Tucked into the corner was a child's crayon drawing. It said, "For Nana," in crooked letters. I couldn't tell which boy had drawn it. It looked like a rainbow. Or maybe a kite. I placed it in a drawer and closed it. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, because sometimes closure isn't the door swinging shut. It's choosing not to walk back through it, even when it opens again in February. I visited the lawyer one last time. I asked to add a line to the will, not to revoke anything, just to direct something, a donation to the local women's shelter, and a note attached to my documents. Handwritten and signed, to be remembered not for what I gave away, but for what I reclaimed. Mr. Sheeran read it, looked up, smiled. "That's quite something," he said. "It's enough," I replied. Spring came early. My basil bloomed stronger than ever. Florence and I joked it was because, I finally stopped tending to people who forgot to water me back. We had tea on her porch one afternoon. When the light was golden and sleepy, she looked at me and said, "You're different now, quieter, but full." And I knew what she meant. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't bracing. I was simply here fully. One morning, Iris drew a new picture of Miss M. It's time she gave me wings. "Why? Wings?" I asked her. She said, "Because you don't live in a box house anymore. You live in the sky. It made no sense and every kind of sense. I kept that one on the wall, right above the kettle, a few times. I thought about writing James a letter. Not to explain, not to forgive, just to say, I'm okay. But then I remembered something Florence once said. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is the one you don't send. So I didn't. I let the silence hold its own shape. And in that silence, I kept building something no one could take. Not with guilt, not with grief, not even with apology. Peace. I am not angry. I'm not heartbroken. I am healed. But not in a way that erases the scar, only in a way that lets me touch it without flinching. And when I look in the mirror now, I see her, the woman who folded towels no one ever used, who waited in lobbies, who bought cereal for people who stopped coming home. And I love her. She was trying, she was hoping, but I love who I am now more because now I am mine. This is not revenge. This is return to a self that never needed to be small, to a voice that never needed to wait, to a heart that still blooms even after the frost. I don't know what James tells people now. Maybe that I drifted, that I got old, that I changed. Maybe he tells the truth. Or maybe he still hasn't looked at it clearly enough. Either way, doesn't matter, because I am not his narrative anymore. I am not a footnote in someone else's story. I am the title. And if they ever look for me again, they'll find something new. Not a mother waiting by the window, not a woman with hands open, but a life already full, already whole, already hers. And the final line is this: I was never gone. I was just becoming.